A personal look.
I cherish my Catholic education. It really was the foundation of my life and my faith.
Vice President Mike Pence tells EWTN News Nightly about the Trump administration's fight for religious freedom and his own upbringing as a Catholic. Auschwitz Memorial Site. News Nightly travels to Poland with the emotional story of the massive loss of life decades ago. Reaching out. Abby Johnson tells her new plan to try and convert abortion clinic workers. And a kicker and his return. The professional football player who came back to his faith and how he now tries to inspire others. On a special edition of EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, December 31st, 2019.
Good evening, I'm Jason Calvi. Thanks for joining us for this special edition of EWTN News Nightly. Tonight, some of the top stories of the year. We begin with a one-on-one interview with Vice President Mike Pence. Earlier this month, he told Wyatt Goolsbee he's grateful for his Catholic upbringing and education.
Well, religious freedom is not just an important issue here in America, it's important around the world. Some religious freedom advocates are worried about the Christians in the Middle East and around the world. This is an issue I know you've been following for a long, long time. What more can be done, though, to push those bad actors, people like China, North Korea, Pakistan, to do more to protect religious minorities and those who are most vulnerable?
Well, our administration has taken a strong stand for religious liberty, whether it be Muslim Uyghurs in China, whether it be Christians across China, whether it be besieged Christians and Yazidi communities in the Nineveh Plain of northern Iraq and in Syria. This president, this administration have stood strong with persecuted religious minorities, particularly Christian persecuted minorities around the world. In Iraq, I'm particularly proud of the fact, Wyatt, that President Trump made a decision just a few short years ago to literally bypass traditional UN funding institutions and provide funding directly to Christian and religious-based non-governmental organizations that could help rebuild Christian communities, schools and churches in areas that have been decimated by the ISIS terrorists over the last 4 or 5 years. We've invested more than $130 million to help rebuild communities of Christians and Yazidis that were displaced by ISIS terrorism. And we'll continue to speak out. I mean, the voice of the United States of America is heard all over the world, and America stands for liberty. And so we'll continue to stand up, speak out, whether it's groups of people that are facing persecution, like those I mentioned, or whether it's individuals incarcerated. You'll continue to see this president speak out for religious liberty and to freeing those that are imprisoned because of their faith. And I have to tell you, the day that Pastor Andrew Brunson came home from Turkey, having been imprisoned in that country for years simply because of his Christian faith, meant a great deal to the American people. And President Trump stood strong until Pastor Brunson came home. And we'll continue to stand with all of those that are being persecuted for their faith around the world.
Mr. Vice President, I have one last thing I want to ask you. While you're here, I want to ask you about a personal question about your own faith. I know you were raised Catholic, you went to Catholic school. Sure. Can I ask you how your Catholic upbringing has influenced the way you think about faith and think about God to this day?
I grew up in a great big Catholic family. We had 4 boys in our family, and so when Father Gleason needed 4 altar boys, he knew to call my dad. And I cherish my Catholic upbringing. I cherish my Catholic education. It really was the foundation of my life and my faith. Later in my life, my faith became more personal to me. I made a personal decision for Christ when I was in college. But I have to tell you, I cherish that Catholic upbringing. I love attending Mass with my mom. I will always feel a great admiration and gratitude for the foundation of faith poured in my life by my parents in that Catholic upbringing.
Mr. Vice President, we appreciate your time. We know you have a busy schedule, so we appreciate your sitting down and talking with EWTN.
Great to see you, Wyatt.
And earlier this year, Vice President Mike Pence visited Poland. He said he and the Second Lady were deeply moved by what they saw at Auschwitz. They toured the concentration camp, which was run by Nazis during the occupation of Poland. In February, the Vice President presented a wreath at a site where executions by gunfire took place. He also laid a rose by a train car commemorating the spot prisoners entered the death camp. Pence later said seeing Nazi genocide up close reinforces his resolve to expose Iranian wrongdoing and anti-Semitism. The Vice President says it's the same vile hatred that animated the Nazis in Europe. And Nazis killed 6 million Jewish men, women, and children. Catholics were also persecuted and killed. White House correspondent Mark Irons traveled with the Vice President and shared this story from Auschwitz.
The horrific effects of the Holocaust were experienced right here at Auschwitz. Now, the Nazis opened this death camp in 1940, soon after their occupation of Poland began. And when the gates finally closed, when it was liberated 5 years later, more than 1 million prisoners had been murdered.
A massive loss of life at the Auschwitz-Birkenau complex. 1.1 million Jews killed, their lives brutally snuffed out in gas chambers. And the Nazis' hate extended to Catholics as well.
Hundreds of thousands of Polish Catholics and Polish priests perished in Auschwitz and that camp complex.
Dr. Suzanne Brown-Fleming with the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum tells me the early days of Auschwitz largely saw the suffering of Polish Catholics. If they weren't worked to death, many of them killed through starvation, beatings, and lethal injections. All the people forced through these gates followed a similar pattern.
Their head would have been shaved, they would have been issued a number, they would have been issued a set of prisoner uniform pajamas that have become iconic today.
One Catholic prisoner, Father Maximilian Kolbe, is now recognized as a saint.
When there was a roll call for 10 prisoners to be shot on the famous Black Wall near Block 11, he volunteered his life for another Polish Catholic prisoner and ended up murdered instead.
His cell has become a prayerful pilgrimage destination for many, including Pope Francis, who visited in 2016. Dr. Brown-Fleming says during the war, Nazi racism was opposed by the Catholic Church, but anti-Semitism still influenced its faithful. It was more common to see Catholics helping Catholics instead of reaching out to suffering Jews.
Instances of help for openly practicing Jews was not unheard of, but much more rare.
As a practicing Catholic who spent years studying the Holocaust and visited Auschwitz a number of times, Dr. Brown-Fleming's takeaway is rooted in the gospel message.
To love your neighbor, that universal love for others that we're taught today as Catholics to live in every way, in our work, in our families.
A message for all to prevent what happened at Auschwitz from ever happening again. Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Moving along this evening, in July, Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider, fired its president. Dr. Lena Wen was only on the job for 8 months. She says the Planned Parenthood board got rid of her after a secret meeting and blames philosophical differences over the direction and future of Planned Parenthood. The ousted president says Planned Parenthood is doubling down on fighting for abortion.
Lena Wen says she joined Planned Parenthood to run a national health care organization and advocate for the broad range of public health policies that affect our patients' health. But she accuses the board of deciding the priority of Planned Parenthood moving forward is to double down on abortion rights advocacy. Her firing comes after a tumultuous year of debating abortion.
Roe v. Wade.
Roe v. Wade.
Abortion supporters worry about new Justice Brett Kavanaugh.
Kavanaugh is an enemy of women's rights!
And the legal future of abortion.
Abortion is a human right!
And states like Alabama passing abortion bans.
The motion to table passes.
Earlier this year, we questioned Wen at the Capitol.
As a medical doctor, when does life begin, would you say? Dr. Wen?
She has a meeting right now. If you
Dr. Wen, please.
I have a meeting that I need to get to.
Last year's annual report shows they took in $1.6 billion.
Why should the government give you another $500 million? Dr. Wen? Dr. Wen, as a medical doctor, when does life begin, would you say, Dr. Wen?
Dr. Wen would not answer our questions. And tonight, she'll no longer speak for Planned Parenthood.
In August, the EWTN family grew as we launched a news service in Africa. ACI Africa has the goal of covering all of Africa for Africa. It's based in Nairobi, Kenya. On the day of the launch, Wyatt Goolsbee spoke to the head of ACI Africa, Father Don Bosco Anyala.
Father, welcome back. Today's launch has been a long time in the making. Tell us about the need for this news service on the African continent.
Thank you very much for having me again to tell you about the launch of ACI Africa on the African continent. There is a need to tell the Africa story by the Africans. And for a long time, the story of Africa has been told sometimes by foreigners and sometimes with a slant towards negativity. ACI Africa would like to network with the Catholic journalists in Africa to facilitate the telling of Africa's story by Africans from a Catholic faith perspective, giving visibility to the church events that take place on the continent of Africa.
So what has been the reaction so far from Catholics there in the region?
Well, so far we have had a good reaction. Particularly because we have received some goodwill messages from church leaders, including some bishops, especially those under the Continental Bishops' Conference called SECAM. We have also had goodwill messages from lay people and different groups of the churches that form the faith base in Africa. And so the reaction is positive. We look forward to collaborating with more clergy, religious, and the laity to tell Africa's story.
What are some of the stories or topics that you'll be covering?
Well, we would like to see what takes place at the grassroots. What is it that people go through in their daily lives? And what is it that Africa can offer to the rest of the world and to the universal church? We would like to do interviews with the different groups of the church at the grassroots in parishes, in the different institutions of the church, and also give voice to the bishops and the priests and the lay and the religious who are in daily contact with the faithful, and what is it that they are doing that could be of a good service and of good knowledge to the rest of the universal church.
Well, what do you think in that collaboration, what do you think are the biggest challenges for Africa right now, for the church?
For the church, of course, there is the challenge of having that faith reach out to everybody. There are areas in Africa where people do not have the opportunity even to have Mass once a month or even once in 2 months. There are remote areas in Africa where the priest has to travel 100 kilometers, 200 kilometers just to celebrate Mass on a Sunday. There are priests who have to go through the challenge of saying, say, 4 or 5 Masses on a single Sunday. So these are the kind of stories that we would like to tell. But also at the governance level, the many countries in Africa face the challenge of bad governance. And the clergy, the bishops have the challenge of criticizing these leaders who have bad governance structures. And so we will be able to give visibility to these church leaders who are trying to bring order, stewardship into the life of the people on the continent of Africa.
Well, this is so important, and like I said, right now you need this kind of news service in Africa, and of course we'll be praying for the church there on the continent. Father Don Bosco Anyala, the head of ACI Africa, thanks very much.
Thank you for having me.
April saw the devastating fire at Notre Dame Cathedral in France. 2/3 of the cathedral's roof were destroyed in the blaze, as was the famous spire. But despite the images of devastation, the cathedral's main structure was saved, along with many of its most priceless contents, including the Crown of Thorns relic. The relic was presented to the public in September for the first time since the fire. The faithful were given a rare glimpse of the relic at a church in Paris. It was only the second time it's been removed from the safe at the Louvre Museum, where it's now being kept. The crown is believed to have been placed on the head of Jesus at his crucifixion. It was obtained and brought to Paris in the 13th century by King Louis IX. That's St. Louis.
Coming up, why copies of the pro-life movie Unplanned were sent this year to abortion clinics.
Welcome back to our special edition of EWTN News Nightly. This summer, pro-life leader Abby Johnson reached out to abortion clinic workers in a new way. Johnson sent copies of the movie Unplanned to every abortion clinic in the United States. The film tells the story of her conversion from Planned Parenthood clinic director to pro-life leader. She left her job after witnessing an abortion. Johnson is the founder of And Then There Were None. It helps abortion clinic workers find different jobs. Wyatt Goolsby spoke to Abby in August.
Joining us now is Abby Johnson, founder of the pro-life ministry And Then There Were None. She joins us via Skype from Austin, Texas. Abby, welcome back to the newscast. What inspired you to send this movie, which is about your experience, to abortion clinic workers all across the country?
Well, I mean, we want these workers to be able to see the truth that's in the film and to be able to hopefully have a moment where they recognize, hey, this is my story too. And then of course we have And Then There Were None. We have the ministry that can help them leave, that can provide that transitional financial help, job resources, and can get them into a relationship with Christ to really help them find healing.
What do you think it is about either your story or the way it's told in the film that will encourage these workers to make a similar decision and walk away from Planned Parenthood?
Well, you know, one thing that was really important to me was that we did not vilify or demonize abortion clinic workers. And we did a really good job of showing people that these are just everyday women who are working in these clinics. They have families, they have children, their wives, and a lot of times they just need a lifeline. They just need that hand up to help them get out.
What do you think is the central message, the most important thing you hope they'll take away from the film?
That conversion is possible, that that there is a place for them to go that will help them, that will support them with open arms, and that they are welcome here in this movement, that they are welcome among us.
You had mentioned the work that you do with your ministry. I'm hoping you can expand a little bit on that. If someone watching this film wants to leave their job in the abortion industry, what would you advise them to do? What are the steps?
So they can go to our website, which is abortionworker.com. We have a 24-hour hotline that they can call anytime, day or night. Someone will pick up. And we just start the process with them, getting to know them, talking to them, learning a little bit about their situation, how they got involved with the abortion industry and why they want to leave. And then we want to talk to them about how we can best help them and how we can best provide for their needs at that time.
Tell me about the impact of the film since it was released.
You know, it's been pretty incredible. We have referred thousands and thousands of men and women to post-abortion healing programs, abortion recovery programs. But we have also helped dozens of clinic workers, people who went to go watch the film as critics, found truth, walked out and said, I have got to get out of the abortion industry. Can you help me? So the impact has really been amazing, and it's been tremendous just to be part of something that God is doing.
How rewarding is that feeling, and what kind of feedback do they tell you once they get out of it, once they get a new job and they come back?
You know, it's incredibly rewarding. I mean, I think anytime that we have something in our past that we're allowing God to use, you hope that it's going to have an impact on someone else. You pray that it will. And so being able to actually see this and to see the fruit from what God is doing is really amazing, because many times in the pro-life movement, we don't see the fruit. We go and stand outside of abortion clinics. We know that babies are saved, but we don't actually get to see it. But being able to see it is really incredible, and being able to partner with God, with Him as the lead, is really amazing. But what we're doing here is it's really a movement. We have created a movement. Unplanned is now going international. We have releases taking place all over the world. So this is really going to impact, hopefully, many, many nations.
Well, profound sounds like the right word to use in this context. And obviously, as you know, Abby, our EWTN viewers will continue to pray for your pro-life ministry. Abby Johnson, founder of the Pro-Life Ministry, and Then There Were None. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Up next, meet the professional football player who loves the Latin Mass.
Finally tonight, on Sundays in the fall, Harrison Butker plays for the Kansas City Chiefs. On Sundays in the offseason, he does a different kind of work. EWTN contributor Colin Flynn tells us about faith, football, and a kicker who made a very successful conversion.
Harrison Butker is a kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs. A star player, he is to many living the dream. But growing up, Harrison wasn't always happy in himself.
I don't know, you just play up a different person for different crowds, I guess. It's like certain Harrison for the football team, certain Harrison for the cameras, certain Harrison for your parents and families, certain guy for the weekends. It's just like you're almost this fragmented person. I was just going through the motions. It was this emptiness. I liked football, but there was nothing I was really passionate about.
On his college football team was a man called Grant, who was a strong Catholic, and he encouraged Harrison to go back to his faith.
The biggest leap of faith for me was finally going to the sacrament of confession. And then that really was what changed me. When I left that confessional, the way I felt, that was really what made me feel different than what I've been feeling before. I felt like I felt like me. I felt like I was authentically Harrison, in every area of my life.
Now, after training, Harrison changes, but not into what you'd expect. He puts on a cassock and serves at Latin Mass every week.
It's opened my eyes to the tradition of the faith, with St. Augustine, with Thomas Aquinas, with all of these great saints, and then seeing that this Mass of the Roman Rite, the Latin Mass, has been the Mass for the past 1,500 years that all these great saints went to. They were saying the same Latin prayers. It's just very beautiful. I feel very united.
Father Sean Tunick is the associate pastor at the parish St. Michael the Archangel in Leawood, which is close by. He celebrates a Latin Mass every Monday evening, and recently he and Harrison organised a solemn high Mass, the most extravagant form of Latin Mass that can be offered.
This just shows me that, especially our young people, they want something more than just the typical. They want something that is noble and beautiful, and particularly when our society is so up in the air about what's a solid foundation. Morals are changing. Our ideas of theology, philosophy are changing. This is the worship of God that lasted all the crises, the ups and downs of history for 1,500 years. That's something worthy.
Final big question, of course. You were just one win away from it last season, but this season, Super Bowl?
I think so, definitely.
Are you praying for it?
I'm not praying about that, no.
Why not? You should be praying for it.
I don't know. I pray for myself to be a good husband and father, I guess. That's number one.
Harrison, it was great meeting you, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Colin. Appreciate it.
In Kansas City, I'm Colin Flynn for EWTN News Nightly.
What a beautiful story. Thank you, Colin. And we thank you for watching tonight and all year. I'm Jason Calvi, and for the entire EWTN News Nightly team, we wish you a happy and a holy new year. Good night, and God bless.